Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalrin, and in today's video I want to showcase you guys a couple classes that probably have the smallest amount of changes in BFA. Now, why would I want classes that barely got any changes in BFA? Well, I usually get people asking me, hey Dalrin, is there a point of me learning this class A, B, C, or D if it's just going to change in the next expansion and or the next update? Well, since so many people ask me this kind of question, I want to give you guys some of the classes that are barely getting changes into BFA. So if you go ahead and start playing those classes now, let's say I want to swap to a different main, whether it be class changes, GCG changes, or whatever it might be, that currently might be bothering you for BFA. And if you want to change to any of these classes, learning them now and learning how to play them right now is more or less going to prepare you for what they're going to play in BFA. As some classes are getting some crazy major changes and others not as much. Now, I'm talking about classes, I'm not talking about specs. So I think from my criteria, when we decide which classes are going to be best, which classes are going to be with least amount of changes, I'm taking a look at classes where at least 2 of the 3 specs, or at least 4, if 2 of the 3 specs are staying more or less the same. Now, I'm not going to mean exactly the same, like exact carbon copy, as all classes in some small sense or in some big sense are getting at least some sort of a change, whether it's some battle abilities, animation changes, a few talents getting thrown in, but the general playstyle is going to be more or less what you will come to expect of what you can play with your class right now in Legion. So, with that being said, let's get on to some of the classes that are getting the least amount of changes done for BFA. Now, I am going to put this list in like a top 5 list kind of deal, but it's not really a ranking list of like, number 1 being maybe the least amount of changes, and number 5 being the most out of the least amount of changes. This isn't like a ranking list, it's just literally a combo of 5 classes that you might want to look into that are getting the least changes in BFA. And the first one being is the Druid. The Druid is barely changing at all. I've been trying to play it and been trying to enjoy it on BFA. And while Druid is a solid class, I'm somebody who likes something new out of the game. With the expansion for Battle for Azeroth coming out very, very soon, I'm very excited about all the new changes we're getting for all these new classes. But classes like Druid staying more or less the same is not something I'm excited about. Feral is all about bleeds, like it was in Legion, and that's really about it. You only lose your artifact weapon as well as some of the traits. Boomkin is, again, more or less staying the same. You do lose your artifact weapon, which you can get back through your talents, same as Feral, but both of those just play so similar compared to one and the other, and the playstyle still is going to be all about shifting between lunar and solar and lunar and solar and building up the star surges, but they're also trying to speed up your spec. For both specs, you do get a few interesting talents here and there that might change your playstyle a little bit, but the very baseline of how you play, whether you're going from lunar to solar while maintaining dots as a boomy, or whether you're feral, maintaining your bleeds and trading the enemy and binding them at about 50 energy. If you can do that same thing in Legion, you'll be able to do more or less same thing in BFA. Restoration Druid and Bear Druid are 2 specs that I did not main or didn't really try extensively at any point in Legion or BFA. I did get on both of those specs in Legion and BFA and played them very casually, and for the most part they feel very, very similar. And they don't feel like there's a lot of progression to it. From what I've seen online as well, most of the changes are just a few talent changes, maybe adding your artifact weapon into the talent tree, but past that, there's not really a lot. So if you want to play Druid, this is a class that has all 4 specs that you can learn right now on Legion and transition them into BFA. For the most part, you'll have a more or less similar experience. The next class is Mage, and this one is almost like a carbon copy into BFA. Mages, for the most part, are getting a little bit of a facelift, but not really a different personality. They are getting some of their legendaries tossed into their talent trees, replacing some talents that you never will really play with. Some of them are getting their artifact weapons like Fire and Frost back into the talent tree, trying to be competitive with some of the other talents, so a few more choices for you, or less choices depending how you look at it. So the specs themselves don't really feel all that different. In fact, if anything, they're just trying to make it a little bit more convenient. They are adding a few cool things where it's flexibility. I like the flavor of, let's say, Arcane Mage, where you can spam arcane missiles without having to wait for the proc. It's not effective, and the proc will make you do more damage, so you should play up to the proc, but the fact that you just can, I guess that's kind of nice. The one thing I did like about Fire Mage, for example, though, is that some of the legendary effects that were a must-need for Legion, and I know how a lot of us feel about legendaries in Legion, and the fact that they're gone is going to be great, but they did offer us some different ways to play. They offered us certain playstyles that were necessary for like a single target build or an AoE build for a certain spec, and the bracers and the belt, if any of you guys actually play mages, were the best legendaries in there. So those effects got transferred onto the spec, so it's kind of fun to run around on the beta, being able to combine both of those effects together as part of my talents. But past that, there's really nothing new that's coming out to the spec, enough for me to want to continue playing it come BFA. The next class on my list is Windwalker Monk, and Windwalkers are getting a few talents in terms of the playstyle change. You also are getting your Black Oak kick that will now reduce the Rising Sun kick and the Fist of Fury, but for the most part, you'll still play very, very similar to your same playstyle. Windwalkers are gonna be more or less what they have been for a while in terms of the playstyle in BFA, minus the Legion crowd control that they had for PvP. Past that, for PvE, the spec shouldn't feel that different. You will have the loss of your artifact weapon, so that's one less ability for you to spend your chi into. You will have at least cooldown reduction, so that's kind of cool, but past that, you basically play more or less the same. For the longest time, I was actually convinced that Windwalkers were not going to ship as they are into BFA, but if that's how they're going to ship, then for the most part, learning one right now is going to be pretty easy to pick it up going into BFA. And past that, Mystery War Monks are staying more or less the same, they're just getting a few mechanics from Mr. Pandaria added into their spec. But Brewmaster is also another spec that's staying more or less the same, and actually for the good reasons, because of BFA. A lot of tanks are afraid of getting global cooldown, as a lot of abilities are now back on a global cooldown. It would suck for you to have to go through a rotation of, let's say, Holy Hand, Crusader Strike, Judgment, or whatever Paladin rotation is, and while you're busy pressing your Crusader Strike because you're trying to stay and keep aggro and do damage to the boss decides out of nowhere to smack you for a bunch of damage, and because you were busy pressing the button for your basic rotation, you won't be able to spend a global popping a defensive. So because of that, Monks might be one of the better tanks, because you have your DCD for your damage rotation, where your punches, your kicks, and your hits with your kegs are going to be GCD of their own, and then your brews that are used to either stop damage from incoming or be able to tank yourself up are in a whole nother GCD. So that playstyle might be better for you if you're somebody who wants to maybe be a viable tank, but you also don't want to deal with GCD, in case some of you were looking to tank into BFA. A fourth class would be Demon Hunter, and Demon Hunter have two specs that are not really getting changed. I covered Demon Hunters before, and they're actually top 5 of my classes that I thought I was going to play into BFA. This whole list of top 5 classes that I'm going to play is still kind of under edits, but Demon Hunters is still in a good spot. For the most part, if you learn currently how Demon Hunters play, you can take them into BFA. And the only thing that's going to be different is the damage and where the damage sources come from. A lot of the abilities that are cooldowns are going to deal more damage, while a lot of the abilities that are always ready for you, so your basic rotation, are going to deal less damage. So you're going to be a little bit more cooldown reliant, even though Demon Hunters kind of were cooldown reliant in Legion. And I feel like if you learn to play Demon Hunter in Legion right now, a lot of the same playstyles and ability combos will make their way into BFA. Minus a few legendaries, although even those are getting put on your talents for you to choose from between one and the other. Overall, the spec is structured pretty well. It has the same exact mobility, it has the exact same playstyle, it has the exact same focus of where your damage comes from. It's just a lot of your cooldowns are going to be a little bit more beefy. And when it comes to Vengeance Demon Hunter, you are still all about dealing as much damage as possible. That's kind of fun part about the spec, is whether you're playing a Havoc Demon Hunter, which is the DPS spec, whether you're playing the Vengeance Demon Hunter, which is the tank spec, for the most part, you're trying to deal as much damage to the boss and or enemy as much as possible. One will just have a few more defensives than the other, and for the most part, the more damage you deal to the enemy, the more times you hit them with fire spells, the more healing you do for yourself, which allows you this very, best defense is a good offense type of playstyle. So both of those specs are staying more or less the same. There are a few changes in terms of talents, but baseline the specs, both the Demon Hunters, Havoc, and Vengeance are going to stay more or less the same going into BFA. And finally, Paladin. Now, Paladin, I had a bit of experience, mostly on the beta, playing Ret as well as Holy. Retribution Paladins are getting a few new talents in terms of how you want to play your spec. What kind of playstyles do you want to make for yourself? Also, some legendaries being added into your talents. But for the most part, you're still throwing judgments, hitting enemies with Crusader Strike, and building up the Holy Power. I was about to say focus. Building up the Holy Power for Temple's Verdict, and then you have your other AoE, which is Divine Storm. Playstyle is more or less the same. Defensives and utility is more or less the same when it comes to PvE, with a few abilities like your artifact talent or artifact trait being added back to your talents as an AoE option. So the spec for the most part should stay more or less how you used to play it. Hell, you can actually combine a bunch of talents to play Retribution Paladin more or less how you would in Legion, and it will be pretty well in terms of transitioning into BFA. Even the playstyle into BFA is easier. You used to maintain Judgment and try to sync as many abilities during your Judgment window. Now Judgment just has a very simple playstyle to it and now generates Holy Power, which makes the spec even easier and better to play. Protection is not a spec that I'm really all that versed well with, but from what I've been able to compare abilities-wise and BFA, the only thing that's really different about the spec is change to your Mastery, which doesn't really affect your playstyle, as well as the GCD, which does affect your playstyle but doesn't change your rotation all that much. The spec that I did get to try out for both Legion and BFA, however, and kind of sort of extensively, is Holy Paladin. Holy Paladin is kind of fun because it's a lot like Discipline Priest. Discipline Priests are all about healing. They are a healer, but the damage they can put out combined with the healing they can do with Atonement, the more damage you deal, the more healing you do for others, that mechanic kind of exists for Holy Paladins as well. The specialization feels really good to play right now, as the spec has a honor talent that is now a normal talent into BFA of melee wings. You basically just go in and start smacking the enemy in the face and start healing your allies because you decide to go hyper aggressive. So it's kind of fun, and I've been enjoying that a lot. Besides that, the spec has exactly the same abilities, the same exact playstyle, the same exact toolkit, and plays more or less the same when it comes to Legion as a ranged healer. Or if you want to be somebody who's up in melee, I feel BFA offers you a lot more avenues to maximize on that extra melee damage while still being able to heal your party, instead of Legion where you're just trying to do as much damage without really having to heal your party all that much. Anyway, I'm just gonna end the video with this. I understand how some people might feel a little bit overwhelmed when it comes to BFA. I am personally somebody who loves changes in my video games. Whenever there's a new patch, new update, new build, I'm usually a huge fan, and I just cannot wait to cover it and see what's new and try it out and try to see if I can learn and adapt. And if you're somebody who likes the same old, you like classes to stay the same, and if you enjoyed the playstyles of any of the classes that are listed here in Legion, and you want to just continue playing what you know you enjoy, what you know you love, what you know you like, because committing to a certain class, even let alone a certain spec, is sometimes a big deal for some people. If any of these classes is something you're interested in and you want to continue playing those same playstyles going into BFA, you're more than welcome to do so. Nobody will judge you for it. Anyway guys, thanks so much for watching this video. I very much hope you enjoyed. I'm gonna go get some food as well as go to sleep. It's kind of like 12 in the morning and I barely ate anything today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see all of you in another video.